I made $743,390 betting WNBA player props with AI. And the part that surprised me was not that a model could find a player who might score a few extra points. The real difference was learning to see the game before the box score made the story obvious. Most bettors start with a number. They see a points line, check the last 3 games, notice a hot streak, and decide whether the player feels like an over or an under. That is backwards. A player prop is a bet on opportunity first, performance second, and price third. If the opportunity changes, the old average can become almost useless in a matter of minutes. That is especially true in the WNBA because rotations are concentrated and roles can move quickly. One starter sits, one bench player enters the lineup, or one matchup forces a coach to change the size of the rotation, and suddenly the shots, rebounds, and assists have to go somewhere. The market is still showing a clean number, but the conditions underneath that number may already be different. That was the foundation of the process behind my $743,390 result. I stopped asking whether a player was hot and started asking what would have to be true for the line to get there. Then I used AI to process that question across the information that is hardest to track manually. The first check was always availability in minutes. Before looking at a points projection, I wanted to know whether the player had a stable role, whether the team was changing its starters, whether there was a restriction, and whether the coach had shown a reliable rotation. A player averaging 28 minutes across a full season is not the same bet as that player entering a game with a new backup, a changed starting lineup, or a recent workload cap. The second check was opportunity. For points, I looked at expected minutes, shot volume, usage, free throw chances, and the way missing teammates redistributed touches. For rebounds, I cared about the opponent's shot profile, the player's position, lineup size, and how many rebound chances the role normally creates. For assists, I looked at ball handling, teammate shot volume, pace, and whether the player was creating from the first action or simply finishing possessions. This is why a season average can be such a dangerous shortcut. Imagine a player with a 17-point season average who has moved into a role that creates 22 points worth of expected opportunity. The season average is describing the old version of the player. It is not automatically describing tonight's version. On the other hand, one huge scoring game does not prove that the volume is repeatable. The question is whether the minutes and possessions that created it are still present. The third check was matchup, but I did not reduce matchup to one defensive ranking. I wanted to know how the opponent actually changes the player's path to production. Does the defense load up on the ball? Does it allow drives but protect the rim? Does it give up second chances? Does it force a primary creator to give the ball up early? These details matter because two teams can have similar overall defensive numbers and create completely different environments for the same prop. That workflow is why I built parlai. Parlai is the sports betting workspace I use when I want live context around a pick instead of a static answer. You can go to parlai.cc and bring the current version of the game into the analysis. It pulls together live stats, injuries, lineups, matchup information, and the price that is actually available when you're making a decision. The useful part is the flexibility. I can ask one model to pressure test a read, or I can run the pick through the top 5 AI models and see where they agree and where they disagree. That matters because a confident answer is not the same thing as a strong answer. When one model sees a scoring angle and another points out that the minutes are unstable, that disagreement is information. Parlai also has live chat, so I can keep asking follow-up questions while the context changes, and it reflects on previous losses, so the process gets smarter over time. After opportunity and matchup came the part that separated a good projection from a good bet: price. I never wanted AI to give me a magic number and stop thinking. I wanted a range, a probability, and a clear explanation of what would invalidate the read. Here is the simple math. A line priced at -110 needs to win about 52.4% of the time to break even. At -120, the break-even point rises to about 54.5%. At -130, it is about 56.5%. So if the model gives an outcome of 55% probability, that can be positive at -110, but the same projection is no longer automatically attractive at -130. The player did not change. The price changed the decision. One of my favorite examples was a player coming off a huge game. The obvious read was to chase the points over because the recent box score looked explosive. The better read was to rebuild the pick from the bottom up. Was the role stable? Were the minutes likely to stay high? Did the opponent create the same type of shots? Was the line still inside the range the analysis supported? Sometimes that process produced an over. Sometimes it produced an under. And sometimes the correct decision was to pass even though the player looked appealing. That is not a missing opportunity. It is what happens when the model is judging the actual bet instead of trying to produce a bet on demand. The 500 little decisions are what made the big result possible. It was not about forcing a massive parlay or finding one unbelievable long shot. It was about identifying a few spots where role, opportunity, matchup, and price were aligned, then using consistent sizing so one bad result did not rewrite the entire process. The money was the output. The repeatable part was the analysis. That is also why I think WNBA props are such an interesting market for AI. The league gives you concentrated roles, meaningful lineup news, and situations where the difference between a normal game and a completely different game can be one availability update. That creates a lot of information, but it also creates a lot of noise. An analytical system can move through that noise faster, compare more variables, and keep the reasoning attached to the current line. The number in the title is $743,390. But the real lesson is not to copy a number or chase a result. It is to build a process that asks what changed, what opportunity exists now, and whether the price still pays you for the risk you're taking. When I make a WNBA player prop decision, I want the role confirmed, the opportunity explained, the matchup connected to a real mechanism, and the price tested against the probability. Parlai puts that entire workflow into one live sports betting assistant, with one model or 5 models, live chat, and memory from previous losses. Go to parlai.cc and run your next slate through it. The box score tells you what happened. The edge is finding out what was about to happen before the market fully caught up.